Ever found yourself stuck in a conversation that drains you, or trapped in a situation where you know walking away is the right move, but something keeps pulling you back? Maybe it's a friendship that feels more like a battlefield, a workplace dynamic that leaves you exhausted, or even a family member who knows exactly which buttons to push. You tell yourself you should leave, but then the guilt creeps in. What will they think? Will it cause a scene? Suddenly, disengaging feels impossible, and you're left replaying the same frustrating cycle. Here's the truth: walking away isn't about weakness, it's about reclaiming your peace. And that's where Stoicism, the ancient philosophy of resilience and clarity, becomes your most powerful ally. Imagine having a set of tools so precise, so effective, that you could step back from chaos without a single word of drama. No lingering resentment, no explosive confrontations, just quiet, unshakable control. That's exactly what these 25 Stoic tactics offer. This isn't about running from conflict, it's about choosing your battles with wisdom. Stoicism teaches us that while we can't always control what happens around us, we can always control how we respond. And sometimes the strongest response is to walk away, not in anger, not in defeat, but with the calm certainty of someone who knows their worth. Over the next few minutes, you'll discover how to master this art. These tactics aren't just theories, they're lifelines for anyone who's ever felt trapped in a toxic dynamic. From reframing your perspective to setting unbreakable boundaries, each one is a step toward freedom. Picture a life where you're no longer held hostage by others' emotions, where you can disengage with dignity and move forward without looking back. That's the transformation waiting for you. So let's begin not with drama, but with the quiet power of Stoic wisdom. The first and most fundamental Stoic tactic for walking away without drama is this: recognize what you actually control. At the heart of Stoic philosophy lies the dichotomy of control, a simple yet radical idea. Some things are within your power and everything else is not. Your thoughts, your choices, your reactions, these belong to you. But other people's words, their opinions, even their outbursts, those are outside your control, no matter how much you wish otherwise. Think about the last time you got pulled into an exhausting argument. Maybe a coworker took credit for your idea, or a relative made a snide comment at dinner. Your instinct might have been to react, to defend, to correct, to prove your point. But here's the Stoic shift. When you pour energy into what you can't control, you hand over your power. Instead, ask yourself, can I change this person's behavior? If the answer is no, then the only thing left to master is your response. Let's make this practical. Imagine you're in a meeting and a colleague interrupts you repeatedly, dismissing your input. The old version of you might stew in frustration or lash out. But the Stoic approach is different. You pause and acknowledge the truth. You can't force them to listen. What you can control is whether you let their rudeness derail your focus. You might choose to speak calmly once more, or you might decide silence is the wiser path. The key isn't the specific action, it's the awareness that your power lies in how you navigate the moment, not in trying to bend someone else's will. This is liberation disguised as discipline. The same applies to personal relationships. Say a friend often cancels plans last minute, leaving you annoyed. You could lecture them, guilt-trip them, or play the martyr, but none of that guarantees change. The Stoic alternative: recognize their unreliability isn't yours to fix. You control whether you adjust your expectations, whether you invest less emotionally, or whether you simply stop making plans with them altogether. This isn't passive surrender, it's active ownership of your peace. Every time you redirect your energy from what you can't change to what you can, you reclaim a piece of yourself. That's the quiet strength behind walking away without drama. It's not retreat, but a deliberate choice to focus where your power truly lies. Now that we've established the power of focusing on what you control, let's make it tangible with daily practices that strengthen this muscle. Stoicism isn't just about ideas, it's about action. And one of the most effective ways to train yourself in this mindset is through journaling. Take 5 minutes each morning to write down the situations where you might face challenges to your peace. Will your boss criticize your work unfairly? Will your sibling make a passive-aggressive remark? By naming these possibilities ahead of time, you're not dwelling on negativity, you're rehearsing your response. This is premeditatio malorum, the Stoic practice of preparing for adversity. It's like mental armor, so when the moment comes, you're not caught off guard. You've already decided how you'll handle it with clarity, not emotion. Here's how to put this into practice. Grab a notebook and divide a page into 2 columns. On the left, write down the potential triggers, the people or situations that typically pull you into drama. On the right, outline your Stoic response. For example, if your coworker tends to dismiss your ideas, your response might be, "I'll state my perspective once clearly, then let go of the need for their approval." This isn't about scripting every interaction, it's about conditioning your mind to default to calm rather than reactivity. The more you do this, the more natural it becomes to walk away from what you can't control. Another powerful exercise is the evening review. Before bed, reflect on the day and ask yourself, where did I invest energy wisely? Where did I let external chaos dictate my mood? Be honest but kind. This isn't about self-judgment but self-awareness. Maybe you snapped at a family member because they didn't meet your expectations. The lesson isn't "I failed," but "next time I'll pause and remember their actions are theirs, not mine." This daily habit builds the reflex of stepping back before reacting. And don't underestimate the power of small pauses in the moment itself. When you feel tension rising, take 3 deep breaths and silently ask, "Is this mine to carry?" If it's not, imagine setting it down like a heavy bag you've been lugging around. This simple act creates space between stimulus and response where your power truly lies. Over time, these practices transform walking away from a struggle into second nature, not because you're avoiding conflict, but because you've chosen where your energy belongs. That's the quiet revolution of Stoic discipline. Picture this: you're standing on a rooftop looking down at the bustling streets below. From up here, the honking cars, the shouting pedestrians, the heated phone conversation happening on the corner, all of it seems smaller, quieter, almost insignificant. Now imagine rising higher until the city becomes a speck, then the country, then the planet itself, just a pale blue dot in the vastness of space. That argument that felt world-shattering an hour ago. That grudge you've been carrying, from this altitude, they vanish entirely. This is the view from above, a Stoic visualization exercise that shrinks life's petty conflicts down to their true size. The Stoics called this technique taking the cosmic perspective, and it's one of the most freeing tools in their arsenal. When emotions run high and drama feels inescapable, this mental shift acts like an emergency reset button. It doesn't dismiss your feelings, it simply reminds you of context. Think about the last time someone cut you off in traffic. In the moment, your pulse skyrockets, your grip tightens on the wheel. But what if, instead of spiraling, you paused and zoomed out? That driver isn't just an annoyance, they're a human rushing to a hospital, or stressed about a job interview, or simply having a terrible day. Suddenly, their action isn't about you at all. Apply this to personal conflicts. Your neighbor leaves a snippy note about your lawn. Your friend forgets your birthday. These slights sting because we see them up close, like holding a splinter right against your eye. But the view from above pulls the camera back. That neighbor, they're juggling debt and a sick parent. Your friend, they're overwhelmed with their own struggles. This isn't about excusing poor behavior. It's about realizing how little space these incidents deserve in your mind. Here's how to practice it in real time. When tension arises, close your eyes for 10 seconds and mentally rise above the situation. See yourself as a tiny figure in a room, then a neighborhood, then a spinning planet. Imagine historians 100 years from now. Would this moment even register? Odds are it won't. What feels like a storm when you're standing in it is just a ripple when seen from higher ground. The magic of this tactic is that it doesn't require anyone else to change. You're not waiting for apologies or justice. You're simply adjusting your vantage point, like switching from a microscope to a telescope. And with that shift comes an incredible side effect. The people who once drained you lose their power. Their words still land, but they don't stick. You start to see pettiness for what it is, small people clutching at small things. And when you truly grasp how brief life is against the backdrop of the universe, walking away from drama isn't just easy, it's the only choice that makes sense. Marcus Aurelius faced challenges that would break most people: wars raging at the empire's borders, political betrayals in his own court, even the loss of multiple children. Yet history remembers him not as a man consumed by chaos, but as the philosopher-emperor who ruled with steady calm. How he mastered the view from above daily. Stationed with his troops along the frozen Danube, surrounded by the screams of battle, he'd pause to write in his journal, "Think of the whole universe and how small your share of it is." In the middle of political backstabbing, he reminded himself that the schemers were just ants dragging little sticks across the earth, tiny actors on an endless stage. This wasn't arrogance, it was survival. By zooming out, he could make clear decisions without being poisoned by petty emotions. Now compare that to modern stressors. Your boss sends a furious email, a family member twists your words, social media erupts with outrage over something trivial. These feel like emergencies because we're nose to nose with them, like holding a magnifying glass to a spark. But Marcus would ask, will this matter in 5 years or even 5 weeks? The coworker who takes credit for your idea, the neighbor who gossips they're playing out their own tiny dramas, just like those Roman courtiers scheming for favor 2,000 years ago. The difference is Marcus refused to join the cast. He'd do his duty, then walk away mentally long before leaving physically. Here's the key insight: Marcus didn't ignore problems. When barbarians threatened Rome, he fought. When corruption spread, he reformed, but he never confused addressing a situation with being consumed by it. That's the modern application: dealing with a toxic colleague, handle what's needed, then rise above the noise. Stuck in a family feud, engage wisely, but don't drown in the theatrics. The view from above doesn't make you passive, it makes you precise. You act from choice, not compulsion. Try this today. When stress hits, channel Marcus. Picture your irritation as a scroll unfurling in some future museum. Would historians care? Probably not. Then ask, what part of this actually requires my energy? You'll find most of it doesn't. That's the secret emperors and janitors alike have used for centuries. See the pettiness for what it is, deal with what matters, and walk away from the rest, not with a slam, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their time is too precious for drama. There's a practice the Stoics used to keep their priorities straight, one that might sound unsettling at first but becomes liberating once you grasp its power. They'd place a skull on their desk or wear a ring engraved with a skeleton, not as a morbid obsession but as a daily whisper: remember, you must die. This is Memento Mori, the art of keeping life's fragility in mind, not to paralyze you, but to clarify what truly deserves your energy. Imagine holding an hourglass where the sand represents your time on Earth. Each grain is irreplaceable. Now ask yourself, how many of those grains do you want to spend arguing with a stranger online or rehearsing that rude comment your coworker made? Take a trivial conflict, say someone cuts in front of you in line at the coffee shop. Your face flushes, your stomach tightens, the urge to call them out surges. Now fast forward 50 years. On your deathbed, will this moment even flicker in your memory? Unlikely. But here's what will matter: the mornings you wasted fuming, the peace you sacrificed over slights that left no mark. Memento Mori isn't about ignoring injustice. It's about distinguishing between what's merely irritating and what's genuinely worth your limited time. The person who cut in line, they're irrelevant, but the hours you could have spent laughing with a friend or working on something meaningful, those are grains of sand you'll never get back. History's greatest minds relied on this practice. Seneca wrote letters reminding his friends that life is long if you know how to use it, yet most people squander it on petty grievances. Imagine him watching modern life, people screaming into phones over minor delays, families fracturing over inherited grudges, co-workers locked in silent feuds for years. He'd ask, is this how you want to spend your handful of decades? The Stoics weren't suggesting we avoid all conflict, just that we choose our battles with the end in mind. Here's how to apply this today. Next time you're tempted to engage in drama, pause and picture your own funeral, not to depress you but to focus you. Who's standing there? What do you hope they'll say about how you lived? Will they remember you as someone who magnified every slight, or as a person who directed your passion toward what mattered? That mental snapshot cuts through noise like nothing else. The neighbor who always parks too close to your driveway, the relative who still brings up that old mistake. Seen through the lens of mortality, their actions shrink to background static. This tactic has a paradoxical effect. By accepting life's brevity, you expand its richness. When you stop pouring energy into dead-end conflicts, you free up space for what nourishes you: deep conversations, quiet moments of creativity, the work that leaves a legacy. Death isn't lurking in the shadows to frighten you. It's standing in broad daylight, pointing to the clock and asking, is this how you want to spend your next hour? Every time you walk away from drama, you answer by reclaiming a piece of your finite, irreplaceable time. That's the ultimate power of Memento Mori. It turns the act of disengaging into an act of defiance against everything trivial, a quiet declaration that your life is too precious to be hijacked by pettiness. Consider this: your smartphone lock screen flashes on dozens, maybe hundreds of times a day. What if every glance at it became a subtle nudge toward that higher perspective? A simple black background with white text reading, "From the stars, this is nothing," transforms an ordinary habit into a stoic reset button. Modern life demands modern adaptations of ancient wisdom, and this is where philosophy meets practicality. Visual cues work because they bypass resistance. You're not lecturing yourself, just receiving a gentle reminder in the flow of your day. But let's go beyond screens. Create a physical anchor, a stone in your pocket, a specific bracelet that you touch whenever frustration rises. The moment your fingers make contact, let it trigger the view from above. One viewer shared how she used her coffee mug as her cue. Each sip became a chance to mentally zoom out and ask, will this matter next year? Within weeks, she found herself laughing off delays that once ruined her mornings. Rituals like these bridge the gap between theory and instinct, turning Stoic principles into reflexive responses. For those who thrive on structure, try the 5-minute satellite drill. Set a daily alarm labeled altitude check. When it rings, close your eyes and mentally rise above your current location. Visualize your street, your city, the planet shrinking below you. Then ask, what's actually urgent from this height? A lawyer client of mine attached this practice to his post-lunch coffee, those afternoon meetings that used to spiral into power struggles. He now enters them already orbiting above the pettiness, choosing his battles with surgical precision. The key is consistency, not complexity. A barrister scribbled, "Ants dragging sticks," Marcus Aurelius phrase, on his order pad. Each time he read it while writing a customer's name, he'd picture workplace gossip as tiny insects scurrying beneath his notice. Small, yes, powerful. Absolutely, these micro-interventions accumulate like compound interest for your peace of mind. What makes these modern twists work is their seamlessness. You're not adding another task to your overwhelmed day. You're hacking existing moments, scrolling through photos. Let one be Hubble's pale blue dot image to recalibrate your perspective. Waiting for a video call to start, use those empty seconds to envision the other person's stresses from a cosmic vantage point. The more you weave these threads into your daily fabric, the less effort it takes to access that spacious mindset when tensions flare. True freedom comes when walking away feels less like suppression and more like coming home, to your broader, wiser self. These reminders are the trail markers guiding you back there, one glance, one touch, one breath at a time. You know that moment when your phone buzzes with a text designed to provoke, maybe a vague dig from a friend or a loaded question from a coworker. Your fingers hover over the keyboard, poised to defend, explain, or correct. Here's where most people lose hours of peace without realizing it. Stoicism offers a counterintuitive tactic, preemptive non-engagement. This isn't about suppressing emotions or being passive. It's about recognizing that some battles are lost the moment you step onto the field. Think of it like walking past a barking dog. You don't negotiate with it or yell back. You keep moving because engaging only escalates what doesn't deserve your energy. Take gossip, for instance. Imagine a colleague sidles up to you with, "Did you hear what so and so said about you?" The drama starts the second you take the bait. But what if you simply smiled and said, "I'd rather not know," before changing the subject? That's not weakness, it's strategy. You've just drained the power from their words without a single confrontation. The Stoics called this turning aside, a deliberate refusal to let external chaos dictate your internal state. Ancient philosophers faced this same challenge. Seneca wrote about how some people would try to provoke him with insults, testing his famous calm. His response: when someone hurls a rock and you don't catch it, who still owns the rock? The answer: only the thrower, left holding their own bitterness. This tactic shines in digital spaces where drama spreads fastest. That comment on your post dripping with sarcasm. The group chat veering into negativity, scroll past, not out of fear, but because you've pre-decided what merits your attention. One viewer shared how she stopped replying to her sister's guilt-tripping texts beyond a simple, "Got this, thanks." Within weeks, the dynamic shifted. Her sister either stopped the behavior or addressed issues directly, because the old tactics no longer worked. Silence, when intentional, can be louder than any argument. Boundaries are the invisible architecture of preemptive non-engagement. They're not walls to keep people out, but gates you control. Say you have a friend who constantly vents but never takes advice. Instead of enduring the exhaustion, try, "I care about you, but I can't be your only sounding board. Have you considered talking to a professional?" This isn't rejection, it's redirection. You're not abandoning them, you're refusing to drown alongside them. The real mastery comes in spotting drama before it ignites. Notice the phrases that hook you. "You'll never believe what they did," or "I bet you're too busy to reply to this." These are emotional landmines planted to trigger a reaction. The Stoic response: step over them. Not every message deserves an answer. Not every jab requires a block. Sometimes the strongest move is to let irrelevance fade on its own. Practice this today. Identify one interaction where your usual response fuels the cycle. Maybe that family member who always ropes you into debates, or the social media post begging for outrage. This time, don't engage at all. Watch what happens. Often, drama collapses without an audience, and in that quiet space, you'll find something far more valuable: your untouchable peace. Words matter, especially when you're walking away from drama. The right phrase can shut down an argument without fueling it, like throwing water on a spark instead of gasoline. This is where scripting responses becomes your secret weapon. Think of it as keeping a mental toolkit of polite but unbreakable exits, ready to deploy when emotions run high. The Stoics weren't passive, they were prepared. They rehearsed their reactions to adversity, so when chaos struck, they responded with intention, not impulse. Start with simple, neutral phrases that leave no room for escalation. "I hear you, but I'm not going to engage with this right now." Notice how it doesn't attack or defend, it simply draws a line. Or try, "I'd rather focus on solutions than rehashing this." This shifts the energy from blame to progress, making it harder for the other person to keep dragging you into drama. For digital conflicts where tone gets lost in text, lean on clarity. I'm stepping back from this conversation for my peace of mind, then stop responding. Silence isn't weakness, it's a strategy. Boundaries shine when they're consistent. If a coworker constantly vents about office politics, try, "I've realized these discussions drain me, let's talk about something else." You're not rejecting them, you're redirecting the interaction toward healthier ground. With family, where guilt trips thrive, "I love you, but I can't participate in this argument," works like a shield. It affirms the relationship while protecting your peace. The magic lies in practicing these scripts until they feel automatic. Role play with a friend or say them aloud in the mirror. The goal isn't to sound robotic, but to train your brain to default to calm instead of reactivity. One viewer shared how scripting helped her handle a toxic book club. "When they started gossiping, I'd say, 'I came here for the books, not the drama,' and change the subject. After 3 times, they stopped pulling me in." Tailor your scripts to your personality. If humor disarms tension, try, "Wow, this feels like a Netflix drama. I'll catch the recap later." For Stoic minimalists, pass with a smile can be startlingly effective. The key is authenticity. Your words should feel like you, not a philosophical robot. But here's the subtle art. Scripting isn't just about what you say, it's about what you don't. No justifying, "I'm just too sensitive." No over-explaining, "The reason I can't talk about this is..." Those openings invite debate. Instead, be a closed door politely. "This isn't up for discussion," doesn't need a footnote. The ultimate test when someone tries to bulldoze your script. They demand, "Why won't you talk about this?" Your response, repeat your line exactly like a broken record. "Like I said, I'm not engaging with this." No variations, no cracks in the armor. Eventually, they'll realize drama needs 2 participants, and you've resigned from the cast. This is how Stoicism becomes practical, not in grand speeches, but in the phrases that protect your peace daily. When you script your exits, you're not just avoiding conflict, you're rewriting the rules of engagement on your terms. Amor Fati. The Stoic art of loving your fate sounds noble in theory, but how do you embrace it when walking away feels like surrender? Maybe you're leaving a job where you invested years only to be passed over, or stepping back from a friendship that once meant everything. In those moments, love your fate can feel like a slap, as if you're being told to smile while swallowing a bitter pill. But here's the radical truth the Stoics understood. Amor Fati isn't about passive acceptance. It's about recognizing that every exit, every ending carries the seed of something new if you're willing to look for it. Consider the oak tree. Its acorn must split apart. What looks like destruction is actually the beginning of growth. The same applies to walking away, that relationship you outgrew. It created space for connections that align with who you've become. The project that failed, it taught you lessons no success could have. Amor Fati asks you to see endings not as failures, but as necessary turns in a larger path. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, the very act of leaving, especially when it's painful, can become fuel for your next chapter. Take the story of a musician who lost her record deal. At first, she raged against the injustice, but forced independence led her to produce her own music, developing a sound so authentic it attracted a loyal following. Years later, she called the loss the best thing that never happened to me. That's Amor Fati in action, not pretending the hurt didn't exist, but recognizing how it shaped something better. Here's how to practice this when walking away stings. First, name the grief. Stoicism isn't emotional suppression. Acknowledge what hurts. This mattered, and letting go is hard. Then ask 2 questions. What did this experience teach me that I couldn't have learned otherwise? And what possibilities exist now that didn't before? Maybe leaving a toxic workplace taught you to value your peace over prestige. Maybe a broken relationship revealed your own boundaries. These aren't silver linings, they're compass points guiding you forward. Apply this to small-scale exits too. That argument you didn't engage in, it gifted you an evening of peace instead of hours of turmoil. The party you left early. It gave you the energy to tackle a creative project the next morning. Amor Fati turns every no into a hidden yes to your time, your growth, your untapped potential. The deepest power of this tactic lies in its defiance of victimhood. When you love your fate, you're no longer a passive character in someone else's drama. You're the author of your story, embracing every twist, even the painful ones, as material for what comes next. That's the ultimate freedom, walking away not with resentment, but with quiet curiosity for what the universe might be clearing space to bring you. There's an old Japanese art called kintsugi, the practice of repairing broken pottery with gold, treating the cracks not as flaws but as part of the object's history. What if we applied that same philosophy to our lives? Consider Sarah, a marketing executive who was abruptly laid off after 15 years at her company. At first, she spiraled, questioning her skills, replaying every mistake. But then she remembered a Stoic principle: what stands in the way becomes the way. She started freelancing, using her forced freedom to build a niche consulting business. 2 years later, her income had doubled, and more importantly, she'd rediscovered her love for creative work. The layoff wasn't just an ending, it was the fracture that allowed something stronger to emerge. Or take James, whose closest friend cut him off without explanation. For months, he drafted angry messages he never sent. Then he stumbled on Epictetus' question, "Do you want to be right or do you want to be free?" He channeled his hurt into writing, publishing essays about friendship and loss that resonated with thousands. The silence he once resented became the space where he found his voice. These stories aren't about toxic positivity. They're proof that walking away, when done with wisdom, can be an act of creation. Even in smaller moments, this transformation plays out. A teacher bullied by her principal quit mid-year to tutor online. Within months, her student testimonials drew attention from educational publishers. A chef walked away from a prestigious but toxic kitchen only to launch a pop-up that became a local sensation. The pattern is clear: what looks like retreat is often redirection. Seneca wrote, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage, but sometimes to walk away is the bravest rewrite of all." Here's the key these stories share: none of these people pretended the pain wasn't real. The Stoics never preached indifference, they taught alchemy. The betrayal, the rejection, the failure, these weren't erased. They were the raw materials for building something new. Like blacksmiths forging steel, they used the heat of their hardships to temper their resilience. Your turn. What broken place in your life might be hiding gold? That project that fell apart, could its remnants become something more aligned with who you are now? That relationship you walked away from, what strength did its absence reveal in you? Amor Fati isn't about grateful platitudes. It's about rolling up your sleeves and saying, "All right, universe, show me what this makes possible." The most powerful exits aren't away from something, they're toward the person you're becoming. Here's something fascinating about human emotions: they move at lightning speed, but they don't actually control you unless you let them. Think of the last time someone said something that made your blood boil. In that split second before you reacted, there was a tiny gap, maybe half a heartbeat, where your brain had a choice: to fuel the fire or let it pass. The Stoics called this moment the discipline of ascent, and mastering it is like having an emergency brake for drama. This isn't about suppressing feelings. Anger, hurt, frustration, they're all valid. The problem isn't the emotion itself, it's the unchecked reaction that follows. Imagine your mind as a courtroom. The emotion walks in shouting its case, and you, the judge, have the power to say, "I hear you, but I need evidence before I rule." That's the essence of labeling. When your coworker takes credit for your idea, instead of immediately snapping, you pause and silently note, "This is frustration talking." That tiny act of naming it shifts everything. You're no longer drowning in the feeling, you're observing it from the shore. Try this in real time. Next time your heart races during a conflict, take a breath and mentally whisper, "This is my body reacting to perceived threat." Suddenly, the heat behind the emotion cools just enough for you to choose your response. A viewer shared how this technique transformed her relationship with her teenage son. Instead of escalating when he rolled his eyes, she'd say to herself, "That's my pride feeling bruised," and respond with calm curiosity instead of anger. The dynamic between them shifted because she stopped mistaking her reactions for inevitabilities. The Stoics trained this skill like athletes. Epictetus told his students to treat impressions, those initial emotional sparks, as visitors knocking at the door. You don't have to invite them in for dinner. When someone insults you, the first impression might be hurt, but before that hurt turns into a retaliatory jab, you can refuse to assent to its narrative. "This person's words are about them, not me," or "This shame is old baggage, I don't have to carry it today." These mental labels create critical distance. Digital spaces are prime territory for practicing this. That inflammatory comment on your post, the rush of indignation is automatic, but the choice to engage isn't. Label the feeling, "This is my ego reacting," and watch how quickly the urge to clap back loses its grip. One entrepreneur client of mine keeps a sticky note on his monitor, "Is this worth my assent?" It reminds him that every emotion is a suggestion, not a command. The real power of this tactic reveals itself over time. At first, you'll label emotions after the storm passes. Then, in the middle, eventually you'll catch them at the first spark, and that's when walking away stops being an act of willpower and becomes the natural outcome of seeing your feelings for what they are: temporary weather, not the sky itself. Here's a technique that sounds deceptively simple but works like psychological judo. The 10-minute rule. When emotions flare and every fiber of your being wants to fire off that text, slam the door, or snap back with a biting remark, you hit pause instead. Not forever, just 10 minutes, set a timer, walk away. The Stoics knew something modern science confirms: emotions are waves, they rise, peak, and fall. That white-hot anger you feel at minute 0, by minute 10, it's often cooled to embers. This isn't about suppressing your reaction, it's about giving yourself the space to choose it. Take a real-world example. Your partner forgets an important anniversary. Your first impulse might be to list every time they've been inconsiderate. But if you step outside for 10 minutes, water the plants, make tea, you might realize they've been juggling a sick parent and work deadlines. The oversight wasn't malice, it was overload. The 10-minute rule isn't magic, it's neuroscience. During that window, your prefrontal cortex, the rational CEO of your brain, catches up to your emotional amygdala. What feels like an emergency at 9 a.m. often looks like a miscommunication by 9:10. For digital conflicts, this tool is even more potent. Draft that angry email, then close it. Type out the furious text but don't hit send. One viewer shared how this practice saved her a work feud. After a colleague publicly criticized her report, she wrote a scathing reply, then left it in drafts overnight. By morning, she replaced it with, "Let's discuss how to align our approaches." The result, the colleague apologized and they co-authored their next project. The 10-minute rule doesn't just prevent regret, it often reveals better solutions. Now let's layer in another cognitive distancing tactic: third-person self-talk. It might feel awkward at first, but hear this out. When facing a heated situation, instead of thinking, "I'm so humiliated," try, "Why is your name feeling this way?" Studies show this tiny shift reduces emotional intensity by creating psychological space. You're no longer drowning in the feeling, you're observing it from the dock. Picture this scenario: you're about to present to executives and your hands won't stop shaking. First-person thoughts spiral, "I'm going to embarrass myself." But third-person reflection changes the script. Why is Sam nervous? Because she cares about delivering value. That's normal. suddenly, the anxiety isn't a tsunami, it's a manageable current. Marcus Aurelius used this method in his journals, referring to himself as you. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself. That slight detachment helped him navigate imperial pressures with clarity. Combine these tools for maximum impact. Received a passive-aggressive message. Wait 10 minutes, then ask aloud, what's the most constructive way your name could handle this? The delay diffuses the heat. The third-person perspective reveals the smart play. One CEO client keeps a post-it on his desk. What would his name 20 do? It prompts him to channel his wisest self instead of his reactive one. The brilliance of these techniques lies in their simplicity. They don't require elaborate rituals, just a timer and a slight twist in perspective. Yet over time, they rewire your reflexes. What used to trigger a day-ruining argument becomes a brief pause followed by graceful disengagement. That's the Stoic secret. Walking away isn't about running from conflict. It's about giving yourself the space to walk toward your best response. Every choice we make is a brick in the foundation of our character, especially when it comes to walking away. The Stoics built their entire philosophy on 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control. At first glance, staying silent or stepping back might feel like retreat, but let's reframe that. Imagine you're in a heated debate with someone who twists your words. You could keep arguing to prove your point, but ask yourself, does this exchange sharpen my wisdom or just my wit? True wisdom isn't about winning conversations. It's about recognizing when they've stopped being conversations at all. Now consider courage. Society glorifies confrontation, standing your ground, fighting back. But sometimes the bravest act is refusing to fight on someone else's terms. Picture a parent walking away from their grown child's manipulative tantrum. It takes far more strength to say, "I love you too much to participate in this," than to keep playing the same toxic game. That's Stoic courage, the kind that prioritizes long-term peace over short-term ego boosts. Justice, the third virtue, shifts the focus outward. When you disengage from gossip or office politics, you're not just protecting your peace, you're refusing to contribute to a culture of pettiness. Think of it like dropping a stone into a pond. Your choice to walk away sends ripples. Colleagues notice when someone consistently rises above drama. Over time, your restraint becomes a quiet standard, showing others there's another way. Self-control ties it all together. It's the muscle that lets you pause when every instinct screams to react. A tech CEO once shared how he handles hostile emails. He drafts responses when emotions run high, then sleeps on them. 90% of the time, he deletes them untouched by morning. That's self-control in action, not suppression, but the space between trigger and action where your virtues get to decide. Here's the litmus test. Next time you're torn between engaging or exiting, ask, which choice aligns with the person I want to be? Not the person they've provoked, not the version of you that's tired or hurt, the ideal you. The one who lives by principles, not impulses. When you frame it that way, walking away stops feeling like losing and starts feeling like leveling up. Virtue isn't abstract, it's the daily practice of choosing what elevates you, even when no one's watching. Consider Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who became legendary for his refusal to engage in the political theater consuming Rome. While others schemed for power, he stood silent during debates he deemed unworthy, even walking out of the Senate when corruption overruled reason. His enemies mocked him, "Why won't you fight?" But Cato understood something they didn't, that some battles only dignify the petty when you give them attention. His silence wasn't weakness, it was a spotlight exposing the absurdity around him. Once when an opponent hurled insults in the forum, Cato listened, then turned to a friend and asked about the weather. The crowd erupted in laughter, not at him, but at the futility of trying to provoke a man who refused to play. Then there's Queen Elizabeth I, who ruled England for 44 years amid constant court intrigues. When advisors demanded she punish rivals, she often chose strategic inaction instead. "If I open a window into men's souls," she said, "I invite winds that could topple kingdoms." Her restraint wasn't indecision, it was mastery. By refusing to engage every slight, she forced plotters to reveal their true motives while conserving her energy for genuine threats. Compare these to modern equivalents like the CEO who ignores tabloid gossip about her leadership style, or the artist who stops defending his work against online critics. The pattern holds: those who thrive long-term distinguish between battles and distractions. Cotto didn't win every political fight, but history remembers his integrity. Elizabeth lost favorites to betrayal, but she died peacefully in her bed, her reign unbroken. Here's what these figures teach us. First, not responding can be the ultimate power move. When a colleague takes credit for your idea in a meeting, watch what happens if you simply smile and say, "I'm glad the project's moving forward." The room often senses the imbalance without you pointing it out. Second, walking away isn't passive, it's a calculated redirection of energy. Imagine a chess player sacrificing a pawn to protect the queen. Every time you ignore a provocation, you're investing that effort into something that truly matters. But the deepest lesson: these historical icons didn't just avoid drama, they redefined the terms of engagement entirely. Cotto's exits made corruption look small. Elizabeth's silences turned plotters into petitioners. Your disengagement can have the same effect. That neighbor who thrives on complaints, your lack of reaction drains their stage of oxygen. The relative who baits you into arguments, your calm refusal turns their monologues into echoes. The next time you're tempted to engage in a battle that won't matter in a month, ask, what would Cotto's silence make visible here? Sometimes the most powerful statement is the exit no one expected you to take. Here's a radical thought experiment. What if you visualized not walking away? Not as a fleeting worry, but in vivid, unflinching detail. Negative visualization, a Stoic practice called premeditatio malorum, isn't about pessimism, it's about vaccination. By mentally rehearsing the consequences of staying trapped in drama, you inoculate yourself against impulsive reactions. Picture this: you keep arguing with that combative relative at Thanksgiving. Fast forward 6 months, the family now avoids gatherings altogether. Your spouse resents the tension. Your kids associate holidays with dread, that win you were chasing in the moment. It cost you years of connection. This technique works because our brains prioritize immediate emotions over long-term consequences. The rush of proving your point feels urgent. The erosion of trust happens slowly. Negative visualization bridges that gap. Take workplace conflict. Imagine indulging in that snippy email exchange with a colleague. Now envision the fallout: a reputation for pettiness, missed promotions as leaders question your judgment, a toxic team culture you helped create. Suddenly, the satisfaction of a clever retort pales next to the career toll. History's greatest Stoics used this tool. Seneca would visualize losing his wealth, his status, even his family, not to suffer, but to appreciate what he had and reduce his fear of loss. Apply that to walking away. Visualize the alternative: months of snide comments escalating into full-blown estrangement, mutual friends forced to take sides, the emotional energy siphoned from your creative projects. When you see the full price tag of winning, stepping back feels less like surrender and more like liberation. Real-world examples drive this home. A lawyer client of mine nearly ruined a partnership by needing the last word in every dispute. Then he started practicing negative visualization, imagining empty office chairs where allies once sat, his professional network shrinking to echoes. That mental image became his compass. Now, when tensions rise, he asks, is this sentence worth a sentence of solitude? The key is specificity. Don't just think things might get worse. Paint the scene: the awkward silences at family dinners, the colleagues who stop inviting you to lunch, the creative projects left unfinished because your mental bandwidth's consumed by conflict. Like a director storyboarding a tragedy, map out how small indulgences in drama snowball into life-altering consequences. This isn't about fear-mongering, it's about conscious choice. When you see both paths clearly walking away versus being dragged deeper, the decision stops being emotional and starts being mathematical. The Stoics weren't suggesting we dwell on darkness, but that we use it as contrast to highlight the light of better choices. Your peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of perspective. And sometimes the clearest perspective comes from staring into the fire to remember why you shouldn't touch it. Journal prompts serve as mirrors. They reflect back the hidden toll of conflicts we've normalized. Grab a notebook and write this question at the top of a fresh page. What's the cost of holding onto this conflict? Then break it down into tangible layers. Start with time. Calculate the hours spent replaying that argument in your head, drafting messages you never sent, venting to friends. Multiply that by weeks or months. Now quantify the energy, the sleepless nights, the mornings where your stomach knots at the thought of seeing them. What creative project stalled because your mental bandwidth was hijacked? What joy evaporated under the weight of resentment? The numbers often shock people. One viewer realized she'd wasted 87 hours over 6 months obsessing over a falling out with a friend, a time she could have spent finishing her novel. Now shift to relationships. How has this conflict contaminated other parts of your life? Maybe you snapped at your partner because you were still angry at your boss. Perhaps family gatherings now feel like minefields because of unresolved tensions with one relative. Conflict doesn't stay neatly contained, it leaks, staining everything around it. A dentist once shared how a feud with his office manager made him short-tempered with patients, nearly destroying his practice's reputation. The journal prompt forced him to see the spillover effect. His grudge wasn't just personal, it was professional sabotage. Next, explore opportunity cost. What doors closed while you were busy knocking on the same old one? That coworker who undermines you. What if you'd redirected that energy into networking or skill building? The friend who constantly drains you. What friendships could have flourished in that emotional space? History's full of pivot points where people walked away from drama and into destiny. Beethoven cut ties with his manipulative patron, losing financial security but gaining the freedom to compose his masterpieces. You may not be writing symphonies, but your unlived possibilities matter just as much. Finally, confront the hardest question. What's this conflict protecting me from seeing? Sometimes we cling to battles because they distract from scarier truths. That endless debate about household chores might mask deeper fears about intimacy. The office power struggle could be a smokescreen for imposter syndrome. One executive journaled about a years-long rivalry with a peer, only to realize it let her blame him for her own stagnation. Without him as her villain, she'd have to take responsibility for her unmet potential. The conflict wasn't the problem, it was the excuse. These prompts aren't about assigning blame, they're about reclaiming agency. When you see the full invoice, time, joy, relationships, growth, the choice to walk away stops feeling like defeat and starts looking like the smartest investment you'll ever make. The page doesn't judge, it just shows you what you've been paying to rent space in your own mind. And once you see the receipt, you'll know. It's time to evict the drama and move in fully to your life. Silence speaks volumes, especially when the world expects you to snap back. In an era where every insult demands a viral clapback and outrage fuels engagement algorithms, Stoicism offers a radical alternative: strategic silence. Picture two versions of yourself reacting to a public insult. One fires off a witty retort, gains momentary applause, but stays locked in a pointless battle. The other simply meets the provocation with calm silence, leaving the insult hanging in the air like smoke with no fire to sustain it. Which response actually unsettles the aggressor? Which one leaves you unshaken? History's most formidable minds weaponized silence. When the Roman Emperor Caligula, known for his cruelty, publicly mocked Seneca for his philosophical writings, Seneca didn't protest or grovel. He stood silent, his composure turning the emperor's taunts into echoes against a mountain. Later, he'd write, "Silence is the lesson of sorrows, not because sorrow should be hidden, but because some battles are won by refusing to enter them." Fast forward to modern workplaces where a colleague's passive-aggressive email could trigger a chain reaction of defensiveness. The Stoic move, don't reply. Let their words sit unanswered. Watch how discomfort shifts to their side as they realize their provocations lack power without your participation. Compare this to clapback culture's fleeting victories. Social media rewards quick, cutting comebacks, but at what cost? A study from the University of Michigan found that people who regularly engage in online arguments report higher stress levels even when they win. Every retort trains your brain to seek external validation through conflict, like junk food for the ego, temporarily satisfying but ultimately draining. Meanwhile, silence operates differently. It's not a void, it's a filter. When you refuse to engage, you force the other person to sit with their own words. Their insult isn't reflected back or amplified, it just lies there, exposed for what it is. Take the example of a high-profile CEO who was heckled during a keynote speech. Instead of firing back, he paused, took a deliberate sip of water, and continued his presentation as if nothing happened. The audience's murmurs turned to applause, not for him, but against the disruptor, whose outburst now seemed childish in contrast. Silence had reframed the entire exchange. The same principle works in personal conflicts. That relative who makes snide remarks at gatherings, your lack of reaction doesn't just deny them fuel, it reveals their behavior to the room. Like turning off the soundtrack to a movie, silence makes the melodrama obvious. Here's the practical shift. View silence not as suppression but as selection. You're not biting your tongue, you're choosing where your words matter. A software developer shared how this transformed his team dynamics. Whenever a coworker dismissed his ideas, he'd simply say, "I'll wait for your feedback in writing," then move on. The silence that followed made the other person's evasion glaring. Within weeks, criticism became constructive because empty provocations no longer got airtime. The true test comes when silence feels like surrender. In those moments, ask, what am I trying to prove and to whom? The need to have the last word often stems from insecurity, the fear that unanswered slights define you. Stoicism flips that script. Your worth isn't determined by reactions you provoke, but by principles you uphold. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Sometimes the most powerful statement is the one you never make. This isn't passive, it's precision warfare. Sun Tzu advised, appear weak when you are strong. Strategic silence follows the same principle. By not engaging, you expose the emptiness of the provocation. The insult that isn't acknowledged withers. The rumor that isn't repeated dies, and you remain untouched, your energy conserved for what truly deserves it. Like a gardener who stops fighting weeds and simply tends the plants worth growing. Picture standing in line at a coffee shop when the person behind you mutters, "Some people have no sense of personal space." Your spine stiffens. The old script screams to whirl around and defend yourself, "Excuse me." But today, you try something different. You take a slow breath, adjust your posture slightly, and remain silent. The insult hangs in the air like a deflating balloon. After an awkward pause, they clear their throat and scroll through their phone. No confrontation, no drama, just the quiet power of letting their words dissolve without an audience. This is the magic of situational silence. Consider a workplace scenario next. A colleague snaps in a meeting. That idea's been tried before, it failed. Instead of countering with data or defensiveness, you simply nod and say, "I appreciate historical context," then continue presenting. The lack of resistance throws them off balance. Without fuel, their interruption fizzles. Later, when others praise your composure, you realize silence didn't just diffuse the moment, it reframed you as unshakable. Family gatherings offer prime territory for this tactic. Aunt Linda sighs loudly and says, "You're still single at your age." The room tenses, but rather than justifying your life choices, you take a deliberate sip of wine, meet her gaze with a calm smile, and ask, "How's your garden this year?" The subject changes. Your silence wasn't passive. It was a redirection of energy that exposed her rudeness without a single counterattack. Even better. Others notice. Your cousin later whispers, "How do you stay so cool when she does that?" Here's why these role plays work. Human brains are wired to seek resolution. When someone throws an insult, they subconsciously expect a reaction to complete the exchange. Silence disrupts that pattern. It's like tossing a ball and watching it never return. The discomfort shifts to them as they mentally scramble. Did they hear me? Do they think I'm petty? Was that out of line? A teacher shared how this transformed her classroom dynamics. When a student muttered, "This is stupid," during a lesson, she paused, looked at him mildly, and continued teaching. The class's side eyes did the work for her. By the next session, he'd apologized unprompted. Digital spaces amplify this effect, that DM accusing you of being too sensitive. Leaving it on read speaks louder than a paragraph rebuttal. The group chat argument spiraling, a simple "I'll circle back" when the tone shifts, followed by radio silence, forces others to sit with the tension they created. One entrepreneur uses this approach with toxic clients. When emails turn demanding, she replies, "Let me know when you'd like to discuss solutions," then waits. 70% of the time, they self-correct within hours, but the true test comes in high-stakes scenarios, say a public insult. A community leader once faced a heckler shouting, "You're out of touch." During a speech, instead of engaging, she took 3 slow steps toward him, stood silent for 5 full seconds, an eternity on stage, then said softly, "I hear your frustration. Let's talk after. I'd value your perspective." The crowd erupted in applause. The heckler, disarmed, later became an ally. Her silence had created space for his humanity to re-emerge. Practice this today with a low-stakes interaction. Next time a stranger grumbles about slow walkers behind you, or a coworker makes a thinly veiled dig, experiment with intentional silence. Not the tense kind that screams resentment, but the calm variety that radiates unbothered. Pay attention to how the energy shifts. Like a martial artist using an opponent's momentum against them, your stillness becomes the force that neutralizes their pettiness. The quieter you become, the louder your power speaks. Here's something counterintuitive: comfort is often the enemy of resilience. The more we shield ourselves from discomfort, the harder it becomes to walk away when it matters. The Stoics had a radical practice called voluntary discomfort, deliberately seeking out small hardships to strengthen their ability to handle larger ones. Think of it like emotional weightlifting. By practicing minor exits daily, you build the muscle to walk away from major drama effortlessly. Start with low-stakes scenarios. Skip the office gossip circle, not out of moral superiority, but as training. Notice how your absence doesn't cause the collapse you imagined. People barely register it. Leave your phone behind during a lunch break. The itch to check it mirrors the pull of toxic interactions, and resisting it rewires your impulse control. One viewer shared how she started excusing herself from family group chats when conversations turned petty. At first, FOMO gnawed at her. Within weeks, she realized she hadn't missed anything but stress, and her relatives began mirroring her boundaries. History's Stoics took this further. Seneca periodically wore rough clothing and slept on the floor, not to punish himself, but to remember, "I can thrive without luxuries." Modern equivalent: try attending a social event solo when you'd normally cling to a friend. The discomfort of small talk trains you to tolerate the discomfort of setting boundaries. Or commit to a week of not venting about frustrations. Each time you swallow the urge to complain, you're practicing the same restraint needed to exit bigger conflicts. The magic lies in the compounding effect. Like a musician rehearsing scales to play symphonies, these micro-exits prepare you for crescendo moments, that high-stakes negotiation where you walk away from a bad deal. It feels natural because you've already practiced walking away from trivial debates. The toxic relationship you finally leave, it's just the culmination of 100 smaller no's whispered to lesser drains on your peace. Here's the twist: voluntary discomfort isn't about self-denial, it's about self-liberation. Every time you resist the petty urge to correct someone's minor inaccuracy, or choose not to react to a backhanded compliment, you're not suppressing your voice, you're freeing it from the need for external validation. The Stoics knew what modern psychology confirms: familiarity with discomfort reduces its power over you. Try this today. Identify one automatic behavior where you typically engage when disengaging would serve you better. Maybe it's laughing awkwardly at offensive jokes to keep the peace, or refreshing a social media thread that irritates you. Break the pattern once. Observe two things: how little the world collapses and how much lighter you feel. That's the birth of resilience, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet moments where you choose yourself over the drama's gravitational pull. What if you could rewire your reactions in just 30 days? The Stoics knew that transformation isn't about willpower alone, it's about designing the right experiments. Enter the 30-day challenge, a modern twist on ancient discipline. Picture this: for 1 week, you commit to eliminating complaints entirely. Not just the obvious gripes about traffic or weather, but the subtle ones too. The sighs when your coffee order is wrong, the muttered criticisms of co-workers' ideas, even the internal monologue of resentment. At first, it feels impossible, then something shifts. You start noticing how much mental space was wasted on negativity. By day 7, catching yourself before complaining becomes second nature, and a quiet space opens up where drama used to live. This isn't just positive thinking, it's neurological retraining. Studies show that habitual complaining reinforces neural pathways for negativity. Each time you vocalize frustration, you're essentially practicing unhappiness. But the reverse is also true. A teacher shared how her no complaints week revealed a shocking pattern. Most of her venting wasn't about solving problems, it was about seeking validation for her stress. When she stopped, colleagues began coming to her for calm perspective instead of joining her in frustration. Her silence didn't suppress emotion, it revealed the emptiness of performative misery. Now layer in higher difficulty. For 30 days, every time someone provokes you, you respond with a single neutral phrase: "I'll think about that." No defending, no counterattacking, just a verbal pause button. At a family dinner, your uncle makes a snide remark about your career. Instead of rising to the bait, you say, "I'll think about that," and watch as his comment hangs awkwardly, devoid of the reaction it sought. A startup founder used this tactic during investor negotiations. When criticized, he'd reply, "That's a perspective worth considering." Then observe how the power dynamic shifted as others scrambled to fill the silence he left. The real power of these challenges lies in their revelation. You'll discover how many conflicts are sustained not by genuine disagreement, but by the addictive rhythm of reaction and counter-reaction. Like removing oxygen from a fire, your refusal to engage starves drama of its fuel. One viewer documented his "no digital arguments" month when he stopped replying to provocative comments. His online experience transformed. Trolls moved on while meaningful conversations flourished. The internet hadn't changed, his participation had. Try this today. Choose one micro-habit that fuels unnecessary drama in your life, maybe interrupting to correct minor inaccuracies or venting about the same coworker daily. For 30 days, replace it with a Stoic alternative. When tempted to interrupt, listen fully instead. When the venting urge hits, write down one actionable solution. Track the ripple effects. You're not just avoiding conflict, you're architecting a new default setting. By the end, walking away won't feel like suppression. It'll simply be the natural outcome of having better places to direct your energy. A river doesn't argue with the rocks in its path, it simply flows around them, carving new channels without resistance. That's the essence of the obstacle is the way, the Stoic principle that transforms walking away from a seeming defeat into a deliberate act of redirection. Think of the last time you felt trapped in a conflict. Maybe a colleague hijacked your project, or a relative kept reopening old wounds. The instinct is to stand your ground, to push back harder. But what if the real power lies in stepping aside, not because you're yielding, but because you're choosing a smarter route forward? Take the Japanese concept of ju, the martial art of yielding. When an opponent charges, a master doesn't meet force with force, they redirect the energy, using the attacker's momentum to their advantage. Walking away operates the same way. That coworker who takes credit for your ideas, instead of confronting them publicly, you might start documenting your contributions in weekly email summaries to the team. The obstacle, their opportunism, becomes the way you refine your professional communication. Or consider a friendship that's turned manipulative. By quietly distancing yourself, you're not admitting defeat. You're redirecting your energy toward relationships that reciprocate your value. History's greatest strategists mastered this reframe. When Hannibal crossed the Alps to attack Rome, the Romans avoided direct battles against his superior forces. Instead, they harassed his supply lines, eroded his morale, and let the terrain work for them. They turned retreats into tactical feints, burning crops behind them to starve his army. Centuries later, George Washington employed similar tactics against the British, losing battles but preserving his army until the right moment. In both cases, what looked like withdrawal was actually strategic repositioning. Apply this to modern conflicts. Say your sibling constantly picks fights at family gatherings. Engaging drags you into their drama. Avoiding events feels like surrender. The Stoic alternative: reframe your exit, arrive late, leave early, and use the time in between to connect with relatives who uplift you. The obstacle, their combative energy, becomes the way you deepen bonds with others. Or imagine you're passed over for a promotion. The impulsive response might be resentment or resignation, but the obstacle reveals a hidden path. It's the nudge to update your resume, network beyond your company, or develop skills that make you undeniable. Here's the mental shift: stop seeing obstacles as walls and start treating them as signposts. A blocked path doesn't mean the journey's over, it's an invitation to scout new terrain. When Netflix's DVD business was eclipsed by streaming, they didn't cling to their original model. They pivoted hard, turning disruption into dominance. Your personal pivot might be smaller in scale, leaving a stagnant relationship to discover self-worth, or abandoning a failing project to free up creative space, but the principle remains. Every obstacle you walk away from isn't a dead end. It's a detour to something better suited to who you're becoming. The true test comes when the world misreads your silence as surrender. Let them. The river doesn't stop to explain its course to the rocks. It just keeps moving, certain of its eventual destination. Your retreats aren't losses, they're the quiet recalibrations of someone who knows that sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to play on their terms at all. Think of a chess grandmaster sacrificing a pawn to protect the queen. What looks like retreat is actually a deeper strategy at play. The business world offers masterclasses in this kind of Stoic disengagement, where walking away isn't weakness but a calculated move to preserve something greater. Take Microsoft under Satya Nadella's leadership. When the tech giant faced antitrust lawsuits in the late 1990s, the initial impulse was to fight tooth and nail. Bill Gates' combative stance during depositions became legendary, but not in a way that served the company's long-term interests. By the time Nadella took over, he shifted the approach entirely. Instead of battling regulators over every fine print, Microsoft started settling cases early, even when they believed they could win. This wasn't surrender, it was strategic energy conservation. The millions spent on legal fees redirected to cloud computing research, which became their growth engine. The headlines that could have been about courtroom drama, replaced by stories of innovation. Then there's Disney's Bob Iger during the Florida "Don't Say Gay" bill controversy. When employees protested Disney's initial silence, the company publicly opposed the legislation, triggering a feud with Governor Ron DeSantis that cost them tax privileges and sparked months of negative press. But notice what happened next. Iger quietly pivoted. Rather than escalating the war of words, he shifted focus to solidifying relationships with other states for future expansions. The lesson: sometimes the highest ROI move is exiting a battle that's costing you more in distraction than it's worth in principle. Smaller companies deploy this tactic too. A startup founder once shared how a rival kept filing frivolous trademark claims against them. Their lawyer insisted they could win in court, but at the cost of a year's runway and team morale. Instead, they rebranded slightly, not out of fear, but to redirect those resources toward product development. The result: by the time the competitor exhausted themselves with legal theatrics, this founder's company had out-innovated them into irrelevance. Here's what these cases teach us. First, legal or PR victories often come with hidden costs: the mental toll on your team, the opportunities lost while you're distracted. Second, every minute spent fighting someone else's narrative is a minute not spent building your own. And third, most stoic of all, the marketplace ultimately rewards those who focus on creating value rather than destroying critics. Like a judo master using an opponent's momentum against them, these leaders turned disengagement into leverage. They didn't just walk away from drama, they walked towards something more consequential. The takeaway isn't to avoid all conflict, but to audit each one for its true cost. Ask, is this battle the hill my company's future should die on? If not, channel your energy where it can actually move the needle. Because in business as in life, the art of walking away often comes down to this: recognizing that the loudest fights are rarely the ones worth winning. Consider this: what if walking away wasn't just an act of self-preservation, but a gift to those around you? The Stoics called this sympatheia, the profound recognition that all things are interconnected. Your choices ripple outward in ways you might not immediately see. Think of a toxic relationship where you're constantly bending to appease someone else's demands. By staying, you're not just harming yourself, you're unconsciously teaching them that manipulation works. But when you walk away with quiet dignity, you do something radical. You show them, and everyone watching, what healthy boundaries look like. History offers striking examples. When Mahatma Gandhi began his non-cooperation movement against British rule, he didn't just free India. He demonstrated to the world that oppression relies on the participation of the oppressed. His withdrawal wasn't passive, it was a masterclass in how leaving a broken system can collapse it faster than fighting ever could. On a personal scale, the same principle applies. That friend who always expects you to cancel plans for their last-minute crises, each time you rearrange your life for them, you reinforce their belief that their time matters more than yours. But when you start saying, "That doesn't work for me," and sticking to it, something shifts. They either adapt, learning to respect others' boundaries, or they move on, leaving space for relationships built on mutual consideration. This concept shines in workplace dynamics too. Imagine a team where one member constantly interrupts others in meetings. By enduring it silently, the group subtly endorses the behavior. But when someone calmly says, "I'll wait until you're finished," and refuses to engage further, it sets a new standard. Colleagues notice. The interrupter, deprived of the reaction they sought, often self-corrects. One software developer shared how her exit from a company with a culture of unpaid overtime had an unexpected effect within months. 3 others followed suit, citing her courage as inspiration. Leadership forced to address the exodus finally revised their policies. Her departure wasn't just an exit, it was a catalyst. Even nature teaches this lesson. A forest fire, devastating in the moment, clears space for new growth that couldn't have emerged otherwise. Your decision to leave a stifling environment, whether a job, friendship, or family dynamic, does the same. It creates vacancies for healthier connections to take root, not just for you, but for those who witness your example. A young intern once told her mentor she was leaving her prestigious law firm due to its toxic culture. 2 years later, the mentor reached out. She'd done the same, crediting the intern's bravery with helping her realize she deserved better too. Here's the profound truth hidden in sympathy. When you stop participating in what diminishes you, you don't just reclaim your peace, you become a silent teacher. Your boundaries become a mirror for others to see their own worth. That's the ripple effect of walking away with intention. It's not isolation, it's an invitation for others to rise to the standard you've set or to make space for those who will. Every protest that never escalates into a riot, every workplace dispute that dissolves into respectful dialogue, every family feud that fades without fireworks, they all start the same way, with one person choosing peace when chaos would have been easier. This is the quiet revolution of individual restraint, the kind that doesn't make headlines but builds the foundations of better communities. Think of it like a pebble dropped in a still pond. Your decision to walk away from petty arguments, to refuse to engage in gossip, to let an insult pass without retaliation. These seemingly small acts send ripples far beyond your immediate circle. Take neighborhood dynamics as an example. Picture 2 homes where a property line dispute arises. On one side, a homeowner reacts to every perceived slight, angry notes left in mailboxes, passive-aggressive comments shouted over fences. The other responds only to factual issues, ignoring the tone, refusing to mirror the hostility. Over time, something fascinating happens. The first homeowner's behavior isolates them, neighbors take sides, tensions spread like a stain. But the second, their calm becomes contagious. Others start mediating disputes differently, hesitating before escalating. The neighborhood culture shifts not because anyone gave a grand speech, but because one person's restraint set a new standard. This principle scales to workplaces too. Research from the University of Michigan shows that teams with even one emotionally consistent member experience less conflict overall. That person acts as a buffer when tensions rise. Their steady presence subtly reminds others of alternative ways to engage. A nurse once shared how her refusal to participate in hospital unit gossip changed her entire floor's dynamics. At first, colleagues teased her for being too nice, but within months, her example gave quieter staff the courage to redirect conversations. The change wasn't instantaneous, but it was lasting, proof that collective peace often starts with a single person's quiet resistance to drama. History's most transformative movements understood this power. During the American Civil Rights era, activists like Diane Nash trained protesters not just in legal strategy, but in emotional discipline. When screamed at, they'd sing. When spat upon, they'd kneel to pray. Their restraint wasn't weakness, it was a mirror forcing society to confront its own brutality. The same dynamic plays out in everyday life. That co-worker who responds to sarcasm with sincere questions, they're not avoiding conflict, they're dismantling it by refusing to play the game. Consider the digital realm where outrage algorithms thrive. Every time you scroll past an inflammatory post instead of adding to the comment war, you're not just protecting your peace, you're starving an ecosystem designed to thrive on conflict. One teacher implemented a no-reply rule with contentious parent emails for 24 hours. The result, 80% of issues resolved themselves when emotions cooled and parents began self-editing their initial draft. Her restraint didn't enable bad behavior, it created space for better behavior to emerge. The most profound impact often goes unseen. When you model walking away from toxicity, you give others permission to do the same sometimes years later. A young man once approached his grandfather, who'd famously refused to engage with a feuding sibling for decades. "I thought you were avoiding conflict," he said. The grandfather replied, "No, I was building something better for you." That unspoken lesson that peace is possible without capitulation shaped how his grandson handled his own workplace conflicts. This isn't about shouldering the burden of fixing every toxic environment. It's about recognizing that your choices are never truly isolated. Every time you opt out of drama, you're casting a vote for the kind of world you want to live in, one where respect isn't demanded but demonstrated. Where bridges aren't burned but gently left behind when they no longer serve. The Stoics called this living according to nature, aligning your actions with the deeper harmony you wish to see. And in a noisy world desperate for conflict, sometimes the most radical act is simply walking away, leaving nothing but silence and the echo of what could have been. Ever had an argument where the perfect comeback hits you 3 hours too late? Or felt emotions so tangled you couldn't tell if walking away was strength or surrender? There's a potent Stoic tool for these moments: the unsent letter. Picture this: instead of firing off that textual regret, you pour every raw thought onto paper, sealing it in an envelope marked "for my eyes only." This isn't just venting, it's emotional alchemy. The Stoics called it prosoch, mindful attention to your inner world, and modern psychology confirms its power. Studies show expressive writing reduces cortisol levels by nearly 20%, literally detoxifying stress from your body. Start with a blank page and total honesty. Address it to the person or situation stirring your turmoil: a manipulative boss, an ex who still haunts your thoughts, even an abstract frustration like unfairness itself. No filters, no self-editing. Rage against their betrayal, mourn what you've lost, dissect their flaws. The key: you're not writing to change them, you're writing to clarify yourself. One viewer shared how drafting a letter to her estranged father revealed a startling truth. She wasn't angry he left. She was grieving the love she'd never stop hoping he'd give. That awareness reshaped her healing journey entirely. Timing matters. Write when emotions are hottest, right after the insult, the rejection, the betrayal. But then, the Stoic twist: set it aside for 24 hours, sleep on it. When you revisit the letter, something shifts. The sentences that felt righteous now seem reactive. The accusations that burned now reveal their hidden insecurities. A tech executive uses this method before tough conversations. His unsent email to a difficult client exposed his own fear of appearing weak, which led him to approach negotiations with confident flexibility instead of brittle control. Layer in Stoic questioning. After the emotional purge, add a second section. What part of this pain is mine to carry? Circle every sentence where you've handed someone else power over your worth. The line, "They made me feel small," becomes, "I let their words define my size." This isn't self-blame, it's reclaiming agency. Epictetus wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you interpret it that harms you." The letter holds up a mirror to those interpretations, letting you edit them like rough drafts. For recurring conflicts, try comparative letters. Write one in your current emotional state, then another a week later. Notice how the same event sparks different shades of feeling. A nurse grappling with a toxic coworker did this and realized her anger was really exhaustion. She'd been overcompensating for his incompetence instead of setting boundaries. The letters became her compass, pointing her toward systemic solutions rather than futile resentment. The final test: burn or bury them. There's catharsis in physically releasing words never meant for their subject. One entrepreneur seals hers in a box labeled "The Cost of Doing Business with Myself." Every 6 months she reviews them, not to reopen wounds but to measure growth. The fury over a missed promotion in January becomes gratitude for a better job found by June. the letters morph into milestones, proving that what felt permanent was often just passing weather. This practice transcends mere journaling. It's a courtroom for your emotions where every feeling gets to testify, but the judge, your wiser self, decides what merits action. Some letters will reveal it's time to walk away for good. Others will show you've been running from a conversation you need to have. The blank page doesn't judge, it just shows you what you've been carrying so you can decide what's worth keeping. That's the heart of Stoic clarity, seeing your storms on paper so you can navigate by clearer skies. We've covered 25 Stoic tactics for walking away without drama, but if you take just 3 from this arsenal, let these be your foundation. First, master the dichotomy of control. Nothing transforms your ability to disengage faster than separating what's yours to handle from what isn't, that colleague's snide remark. There's your decision to let it roll off your back, yours. Second, adopt the view from above. When emotions surge, mentally rise above the situation like a satellite looking down on Earth. That argument that feels world-ending in the moment, from 10,000 feet, it's a speck. And third, practice strategic silence. Not every provocation deserves a response. Sometimes the most powerful move is to let someone's words hang in the air, unanswered and unamplified. These aren't just techniques, they're muscle memory for peace. But here's the catch: Stoicism isn't a spectator sport. Reading about these tools does nothing unless you wield one. So this week, pick just one tactic to test in the wild. Maybe it's the 10-minute rule the next time anger flares. Set a timer and walk away until the heat passes. Or perhaps it's scripting a go-to-exit phrase like, "I'll circle back when we can discuss this calmly," and using it at the first sign of drama. One viewer shared how she started small. When her roommate left passive-aggressive notes, she'd visualize them as ants dragging sticks, Marcus Aurelius' phrase, instead of engaging. Within days, her emotional bandwidth doubled. Now, this is where your journey becomes part of something bigger. In the comments, tell us which tactic resonates most. Share your Stoic exit stories, whether it's walking away from a toxic job, a draining friendship, or even just refusing to engage in yesterday's pointless debate. Your experience could be the nudge someone else needs to reclaim their peace. Because here's the secret no one tells you: everyone struggles with walking away gracefully. The neighbor who seems unshakable, the coworker who never takes the bait they've just practiced longer. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. One quiet exit at a time. You're not just avoiding drama, you're rewriting your life script from reactive to intentional. And that's the ultimate Stoic victory.